We spend so much time and energy protecting our computers, our phones. But what about the one single device that connects all of them to the outside world? Today, we're going to pull back the curtain and take a look at the secret life of your Wi Fi router.
So you've done everything right. You've created a Wi-Fi password that's like a mile long, full of symbols, totally impossible for anyone to guess. But what if I told you that in a lot of cases, that amazing password you created could be completely bypassed? Yeah, let's dive into how that's even possible. All right, our first stop on this journey is a feature that was actually designed for convenience. But as it turns out, it accidentally created this massive gaping security hole. We're talking about a seriously flawed PIN system.
So, this feature is called Wi Fi Protected Setup, or you've probably seen it, WPS. And the idea was simple enough, right? Instead of typing in that super long password, you just punch in a short, 8-digit PIN from a sticker on your router. It was supposed to make our lives easier. The problem is, it also made an attacker's life way easier.
And this quote right here from a security analysis just hits the nail on the head. Your strong password doesn't mean a thing if there's a backdoor just sitting there. And with WPS, that backdoor is often left wide open.
Now, you might look at an 8-digit PIN and think, hey, that seems pretty solid. And you're right, that gives you 100 million possible combinations. If an attacker tried, say, one guess every single second, it'd take them over 3 years to try them all. That seems totally secure, right?
Well, no. Wrong. Because of a really critical design flaw, an attacker doesn't have to guess 100 million times. They only need to guess about 11,000 times. That is a huge difference. We're talking about turning years of work into just a few hours. So how on earth is this possible?
This is where it gets really interesting, and you can see the whole flaw laid out right here. A secure system, the way it should work, is it checks all 8 digits at once. But WPS doesn't do that. First, it checks the first 4 digits and literally tells the attacker, yep, you got that part right, or nope, try again. Then it checks the next 3 digits separately. And that last digit, it's just a checksum, which is super easy to calculate. So instead of one big, hard problem, the attacker has 2 tiny, easy problems. They only have to guess from 10,000 possibilities for the first part, and then just 1,000 for the second. It's a piece of cake.
And this is probably the best way to think about it. You can have the most advanced, unpickable lock on your front door, but if you leave the key right there under the doormat, that lock is completely useless. And that's exactly what an enabled WPS feature does to your amazing Wi-Fi password. So, okay, takeaway number 1 is crystal clear. Disable WPS. It's just a huge, unnecessary risk. But unfortunately, that doesn't make your network invincible. Attackers have another way in, and this one targets the very protocol that most of us rely on for security every single day.
You see, most of us use a security protocol called WPA2 for our Wi-Fi. And while it is so much stronger than WPS, it still has a weakness, a little crack in the armor that attackers can exploit to grab the data they need to start working on your password offline. This weakness is hidden inside something called the four-way handshake. Just think of it like a secret conversation, like a digital handshake that your phone or your laptop has with the router to prove it knows the password and gets permission to join the network. It's all supposed to be a very secure exchange. But an attacker can hijack this whole process. As you can see here, they start by just monitoring the network. Then they send a special command that forcibly kicks one of your devices off the network. That's the deauthenticate step. Now here's the clever part. Your device, being helpful, immediately tries to reconnect. And as it does that, the attacker captures that incredibly important handshake data. And finally, they take that data offline and use powerful computers to try and crack your password, guess by guess. Now, unlike the WPS problem, this attack is where your strong password really becomes your main line of defense. As security expert David Bombo warns, this is exactly why a long, complex passphrase is still so vital. It makes that final crack step incredibly difficult, maybe even impossible for the attacker. But what if the vulnerabilities aren't just in the protocols themselves? And this brings us to a completely new way of looking at router security. We really need to stop thinking about your router as just that one plastic box sitting on a shelf. We need to start seeing it for what it really is now, an entire ecosystem. This new perspective actually comes from the U.S. National Institute of Standards and Technology, or NIST. These are the folks who create the frameworks for cybersecurity, and they've pointed out that our old definition of a router is actually dangerously out of date. I mean, just look at this diagram from NIST. It shows their modern definition. A consumer-grade router product isn't just the physical device. It is a whole ecosystem that also includes the smartphone app you use to manage it and the back-end cloud servers that the manufacturer uses for things like updates. Every single one of these is a potential point of attack. And that's the crucial point here. A chain is only as strong as its weakest link. An attacker doesn't necessarily have to break into the router itself anymore. A simple vulnerability in the mobile app or maybe a data breach on the manufacturer's servers could hand them the keys to your entire home network. So, recognizing this complex ecosystem, that's step one. But how do we actually secure it? Well, NIST provides a blueprint, not just for us as consumers, but for the manufacturers themselves. I know, this slide looks incredibly complicated, but that's really the whole point. What NIST found is that no single security standard can cover the entire ecosystem. As you can see from all the different categories here, to properly secure the router, the apps, and all the processes behind the scenes, you have to layer multiple different standards together. A truly secure product has to cover all these bases. And what's really fascinating is that security goes so far beyond just technical specs. NIST emphasizes that it's also about the manufacturer's processes. Are they developing software securely from day one? Do they have a clear public process for what happens when a vulnerability is discovered? Are they actively managing risk? True security isn't just a feature you can check off a box. It's a continuous process. Okay, so we've talked about some complex vulnerabilities and these really high-level security frameworks. But what does this all mean for you, at home, right now? Let's bring it all back down to earth. This table is basically your action plan. First things first, log into your router settings and find the option to disable WPS. Just turn it off. It's an unacceptable risk. Second, look for the setting for firmware updates and turn on automatic updates. This is what protects you from known exploits across that whole router ecosystem. And finally, let's go back to the basics. Make absolutely sure you are using a long, complex, and unique passphrase for your Wi-Fi. That's still your best defense against those handshake attacks. And that really leaves us with one final thought to chew on. Your router, it acts as the digital security guard for every single device in your home. But as we've seen today, that guard needs protection too. It's not just a box, it's a whole ecosystem, and securing it requires a lot more than just a strong password. It requires our vigilance.